Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time, rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today we're going to unravel the myths and misconceptions of organ donations, a conversation that mothers and others need to hear. And today I have with me Lauren, who is the mother of a donor. I have Chris, who is a donation coordinator. And I have Melanie, who's the mother of young children who never wanted to have this conversation. But it is a conversation that we all need to have. And sometimes it just takes one good story to change our mind and make us want to donate, I guess. But I don't think that most people would understand this particular issue unless it hit home for them first. So, Lorraine, would you be able to tell us a little bit about your experience to start off the conversation?
Sure. Oh, it was the day before my son was supposed to start 7th grade. He was 12 years old. This was about 13 years ago. And like any other normal day, we had bought backpacks and shoes and everything we needed for school, and his friend stopped by and said, "Let's go on a bike ride." I said, "Okay. Be back in 15 minutes. Dinner will be ready," putting a barbecue together. And just as we were taking off the food off of the barbecue, I was an EMT in the town that we lived in, my pager went off, and it was for a pedestrian motor vehicle accident right at the end of the road that we lived on. And I threw on my boots and went down to the end of the street, and there my son's friend was standing up, and I knew that it was my son that was down. And from that point, things get a little foggy. It's hard to really hold on to that. But I was the first EMT on the scene, so I was giving care. And then when the ambulance came, that's when things kind of went into this surreal mode. I know I heard things. I didn't hear them. I know I said things, but I don't remember what I said. My son was taken to St. Joseph Hospital here in Nashua. He was stabilized and intubated, and then he was life-flighted from Nashua to Children's in Boston. And that's where he stayed overnight, and they were doing all kinds of neurological testing, and we got really wonderful care and attention from down there. But it was becoming pretty evident that the nature of his injury, he wasn't going to recover from it. And so it was just a matter of a waiting game. And so about 9 hours later, he was declared brain dead, and that's when we started the process with the organ donation.
Had you ever thought about organ donation before that day?
Not really. Not even something that you even want to think about, you know. I know that it comes up every year, or whenever we renew our licenses, organ donation was always there. I was always an advocate. My father had lost a kidney and a half. It was, you know, omnipresent. I'm in the medical field. It was just something that was always there. But never in a million years did I ever think that it would be my son donating his organs to save other people. So it was difficult.
I can't even imagine.
Don't imagine.
No.
Don't imagine.
So, Chris, how many organ donations are needed in the New England area or the United States at any given time?
Well, across the country, there are about 115,000 people awaiting solid organ transplant, and about 28,000 people a year are transplanted. So the number of people waiting far outweighs the number of people, the number of organs that are available for transplant, and about 18 people a day die waiting for solid organ transplant. So we try as much as we can, along with the assistance of people like Lorraine who are willing to share their stories. You know, it means much more to for me to go out and talk and share a story with someone who's gone through donation, and to raise public awareness about donation. As difficult as it is to talk about, it's something that we all need to think about at some point, unfortunately.
So when there is an accident and somebody has to make that decision, how long do they have to make that decision?
Well, it depends on the circumstance. So the process generally is that there are triggers that the hospital has to call the New England Organ Bank or their local OPO, organ procurement organization, depending where they live. They call the organ bank. The organ bank then alerts a call to our triage system. We call back and assess the situation. We, at that point, make a collaborative plan with the hospital to respond on site if it's appropriate, review the chart, and then most importantly, we make sure that it's appropriate to approach the family or not approach the family, because we don't want to do it prematurely, and we want to make sure that we don't do it too late also. So the timing really depends on the circumstance.
Now, with organ transplants, do you need to be the same blood type? Does that matter? And if will the person that is going to be the organ donor, would they have to leave the hospital and go someplace else to make that donation? How would that work? Would it be further upsetting to the family because the person was leaving the hospital?
Well, organs are placed by size, weight, location, blood type, and waiting time. So we try to place organs as close to our region as possible, to the sickest patients within our region, and then we go outside of the region, but by blood type and size. And to the second part of your question, if the donation occurs at the hospital where the patient has been declared brain dead, if that patient is a brain dead organ donor. So if that patient, for example, is at Dartmouth in New Hampshire, that's where the donation will occur, and the transplant surgeons who've accepted the organs will come to the donor hospital so that the patient doesn't have to transfer and put the family through the trauma of that. We do have a tissue recovery center at the New England Organ Bank, so we do transport patients from a hospital to our tissue recovery center to recover tissue. It's a more efficient way, it's a more sterile way generally, and we can control that, and we tend to be able to recover more tissue. So that's the only time that the patient would transfer from the hospital to the organ bank, but that would be for tissue donation only after the patient's heart is stopped. And we only do that with the consent of family, and it's not a requirement.
Is that adults only, or are children included in that tissue donation?
It could be adults or pediatrics, but again, only with family consent.
What happens if there's a disagreement between the parents?
Well, when a patient is under age 18, even if it's on their driver's license, if they're under 18, the legal guardian still has we still have to obtain consent from the legal guardian. So if there is a disagreement between the parents, we do the best that we can to try to bring them to a mutual agreement. We try to find out what the concerns are with the family, what the issues are, and many times we're able to bring those families back together, but we do need no known objection from either parent if they're both living. So it's a difficult situation if both parents can't agree, and there are times that we have not been able to go forward with donation.
Okay. And Melanie, didn't you have a concern about the funeral home after?
I did. I guess my question is, depending on which religion you are, is it a concern as far as cremation or open casket? Do you have to worry about all of those factors into something happening when a situation like that occurs? Do you have to foresee those if you want things done a certain way? As far as if you do donate organs, can you have an open casket? Can you have a respectful funeral and proper burial? If that were to happen, I guess that's also a concern that I were to have.
All major religions do support organ and tissue donation as a personal choice. And we do, everything is a surgical incision. We do minimize the appearance to the donor. And you are able to have an open casket. It does not interfere with cremation, and I'm certain Laureen can speak to her experience directly. And we work with the funeral home. They are aware that the patient is going to be an organ donor, but unless you told your family, they would not know that your loved one was an organ donor.
Okay.
So, and you can still have an open casket.
Okay.
And we work within the boundaries of the family. So if I have a family that says to me, Chris, I want to donate, but because of our religion, we need to have the body at the funeral home by sunrise, depending on the religion, we will do everything within the families to advocate for the family to have that done. So we would not go against the family's wishes because we want to honor the family's wishes and be an advocate for that family and for their loved one.
Yeah. My major concern was just out of privacy. I would rather the family know if it were, my husband and my decision to donate organs, and not have that publicized to everybody. That would be a family decision, like I said, that, we would probably have to make during that time if we were to go about that route in life, knock on wood.
Right.
So that's...
So expanding on what Melanie is saying, I guess, can it be private? Is it very private for the family? Or, on the other hand, if a family wanted to meet the recipient, is that possible?
Well, as far as the confidentiality issue, it is confidential. We do not share information with anyone about the donor. Even, at the receiving centers, we give the basic information about the donor. Of course, they do have, more information about the patient, but they don't share it with their recipients either. So it is confidential. So unless you want to share that information with your family and friends, we don't share that information. And even when we're present in the ICU, a lot of families do have that concern, and we try very, very hard to minimize our appearance on the unit, to minimize the number of family members, or help the family manage their family members. And asking questions, we direct them back to the family, the staff directs them back to the family, and we help direct the staff in saying, not providing information to friends and family about the donation unless the family wants to provide that. And as far as meeting the recipients, that is possible with the consent of both parties. So the donor family and the recipient would need to agree to meet. And we, at the New England Organ Bank, we have a large aftercare department, and we have facilitated some of those meetings, and they're very, very moving and meaningful, and it's emotional. Like I can't talk about. Laureen obviously could maybe talk about that more.
Were you able to meet any recipients?
No.
Or receive any correspondence from them?
I received minimal correspondence. I have found since my journey's been going on that recipients are actually discouraged from communicating with the donor families. There's this line that comes through that I find to be one of the most irritating things I've heard as well. Someone had to die in order for me to live. And I want to remove that because that's not it at all. Our loved ones were not sacrificed. Our loved ones passed away out of control. We did not have any control over what happened. What we are doing is we're thinking forward and saving other families the anguish that we went through. So nobody had to die. Somebody died. And as a result of this horrific event, we're paying it forward and we're helping other people. So I wanted to just remove that. Nobody had to die. Somebody died. It happens all of the time, but it wasn't a have to die. So because of that, your loved one is now here. And I found that we were treated with the utmost of dignity and respect. I did try to communicate with the recipients. The way you do it is you write a letter to the organ bank, putting your loved one's date of death, and then they are able to, through numbers and some system down there, they then let the recipient know that there's correspondence from the donor, and then it's up to the recipient if they want to receive it or not. And then once that ice is broken, once that first initial happened, then it can move forward. I heard from the Heart's mother, which was wonderful. He's in the medical field, which was really great to hear. She was thankful her son was here. That was great. And then I heard from the kidney, one of his kidneys, and that went out to Minnesota, and that was really great, because that was a grandfather who had taken himself off of dialysis. And they said my son's kidney was a perfect match. Couldn't have been more perfect if it was an identical twin, which is why it went so far away. He received the kidney, he was back up, which means that his grandchildren are still sitting on his lap at Christmas. What's not to celebrate about that? That's just amazing, absolutely amazing. So I never met them, but when I went to the donor games in Florida, you know, we were sponsored, my family won Donor Family of the Year. There was an awful lot of time standing in lines, waiting for credentials and waiting for this and waiting for that. And they kind of segregate the donors from the recipients by the color of the T-shirt that they wear. So you could always tell who's a donor, who's a recipient. And then conversations would start. Oh, when did you get, you know, what did you get? Oh, I got a kidney. When did you get it? Where are you from? And we were actually watching people meet for the first time in line, and it was just amazing, amazing to see this unification. And there's always dark stories, there's always the negative, but what I saw down there was the closest thing to a religious experience they could have ever had. It was amazing to see that.
Does it help with the grieving process?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely, it does. I mean, in the split second that my son's accident happened, I've got 4 families that don't have to go through the anguish. And so, did I want my son to make me a grandma? Absolutely. He's my firstborn son, but he lives on in other people in a much different way. So it has moved forward. It has gone to another generation, a different generation, but another generation.
That's
amazing.
Great. That is amazing.
Yeah.
What type of organs can we donate?
From a brain-dead organ donor, we can donate heart, we can donate a liver, and if the liver isn't donated as a whole organ, it can actually be split and donated to 2 different people. Lungs can be donated, and they can be donated as a double lung transplant, or they can be split and donated to 2 different recipients as a single lung each, or as a heart lung. Kidneys can be donated, small bowel can be donated, pancreas, and if not the pancreas as a whole, the cells from the pancreas, islet cells, which is helping people with diabetes so that they can live without insulin shots.
Wow.
Corneas.
And for tissue, corneas can be recovered. We're now doing the vascular graft with the face transplants and the forearm transplants at Brigham. Skin can be recovered to help burn victims. Vein can be recovered to help patients that need different procedures, and bone can be recovered also, and that can be recovered and used in many, many different ways. One tissue donor can help up to 200 people.
200 people?
So
Wow.
it's heart valves can be recovered, and that's truly life-saving for a young woman of childbearing age or children that doesn't need to go on medication for blood thinners once they have their heart valve transplant. So there's many, many benefits to the recipients. My husband just had an ACL repair, a tendon in his knee, and he had a cadaver tissue, and of course we did write the letter to the donor family to thank them. How could I not do that? But there's the gift just continues to go on and on.
How long are those organs viable for?
A heart needs to be recovered and transplanted within not recovered, but a heart needs to be transplanted within 4 to 6 hours, as well as the lungs. A pancreas, probably up to about 12, 14 hours. Kidneys can be technically up to 72 hours if they're on a pump. A liver is within 12 to 24 hours, and small intestine is generally within a pretty short period of time, which is why there are limitations to who can get transplanted. So, you know, if I'm in Boston, it's difficult to get a heart to California. So that's why we try to transplant organs locally, because the sooner they're transplanted, the better that they work. And like you were talking about, Lorene, with your son's kidney being a perfect match, we use UNOS, which is the United Network of Sharing, when we are using our list that everybody's interested in. So that they manage the list. So if I have an organ donor, they have all the information on a potential for the kidney recipients, and patients that do have a perfect match do get priority on the list. So that's why, because they work the best that way.
So is it convenient to donate? I mean, I can only imagine that the parents must be in shock and distraught over the loss of a child or a partner or a friend. So how does it work? Is there a lot of paperwork to fill out? Are donors compensated? Who pays the bill for taking the organs out and bringing them to the other patient? I mean, how does that all come together?
The process and
The process.
The process is long. Unfortunately, we can't avoid that. And it's different even from when you were here. I've been here at the New England Organ Bank for 15 years, and it's different from even when I started. But we're finding by managing donors longer that we're able to recover and transplant more organs. So the paperwork itself is either, if the patient is a registered donor, meaning they have signed the registry or have a donor card, that we disclose to the family or their healthcare proxy, whoever their is available that's appropriate. We would disclose the information to them that they're a registered donor, or if they're not a registered donor, then we would obtain consent. And then we have to go through a very extensive medical social history. And so depending on the history of the potential donor, it can take 15 minutes, and I've had some that have lasted 2.5 hours because I've had to use an interpreter line. So the paperwork in general takes about 20-25 minutes. The donation can take anywhere from 24 to 72 hours, which is very on the long side, but it can on occasion, because we're working to stabilize the patient, we're working to place the organs appropriately. We don't want to recover organs that we are not able to place. We do make that promise to the family, and we, because we're advocating for the family and for the donor, so we want to give that. We don't want to give the family false hope either.
So what are some conditions that would preclude somebody from being able to donate? I mean, you know, diseases, anything?
At the New England Organ Bank, we currently are not, a patient that has HIV is a rule out for organ and tissue donation. A patient that has metastatic cancer is a rule out for organ and tissue donation. We still may consider patients on a case-to-case basis that have a history of cancer, depending on the type, depending on the treatment, depending on when it happened. So those patients are still considered, but they're considered on a case-to-case basis, and it's a very intensive screening process, because we obviously want to make sure for the safety of the recipients that they're receiving an appropriate organ. And to speak to your other point about cost of donation, it does not cost the donor family anything to donate. The New England Organ Bank absorbs the cost of anything associated with donation once the patient's been declared brain dead, or lab work or anything that's associated with donation.
The only thing I was billed was the $25 non-admit fee from the emergency room at St. Joe's, and they waived it. So there was no cost to me whatsoever. Insurance took care of it. So.
And when we as parents have to make that split decision, whether it be at a hospital or whatever the situation is, or the facility that you are in at that time, is it a panel of doctors asking you about organ donation, or do they bring you into a boardroom? Is it a decision that's made there, or in the hallway, in the room with the patient? And what are the pros and cons? Do they tell you the pros and cons on?
Well, having gone through this and going through the process, he was evaluated when he was first transferred to Children's Hospital, and they gave us a status update. And even though I'm in the medical field, I needed to hear it a few times. So they explained what was going on, and the different neurologic tests that they were performing.
They being the doctors.
They being
at
the
Children's,
doctors at
right.
Children's, the ones that were actually caring for my son. And so as time progressed, you know, he would give us, he would say, well, we're going to do more neurologic tests in an hour to see if there's been any response or any change. And it was observed very closely by intensive care people, intensive care staff, nurses and doctors over time. And so, you know, we were updated every single time that they were doing the neurologic tests to see if there was any change in frequency, intracranial pressure, I mean, all these different tests, and there was no change, no change, no change. So it's not a split-second decision. It's something that happens over time, and as you're watching this and you're actually living it, there's been no change. It's been 9 hours. There's been no change. It's been 10 hours. And, you know, and you start, there's this acceptance piece that starts to come in, and then when somebody brings up organ donation, a brain dead declaration, that sort of thing, it's already based on many hours of going through the evaluation process to determine brain death. So it's not yes or no, you have to do it right now. And so then it was really his primary care nurse was the one that my ex-husband and I interacted with. She was the one that kind of followed us through the whole process. And then once he was declared brain dead, then the organ bank representative came through, and we started that organ donation process. So it's not something that happens in the blink of an eye. You're not, by that point, the exhaustion and the shock is starting to wear off, and this horrible reality is kicking in. And that's where you're at emotionally when organ donation is brought up to be a discussion topic.
Well, and I think to speak to your point, I can imagine as a family, and I can only imagine because I've not been through it, that you feel kind of, you know, families are bombarded with decision after decision after decision, and you have that feeling that you're going to be taken into a room and asked questions. And we have family counselors that come to the hospital and work with the families, donation coordinators such as myself, we work with the families. We have many staff that work with the families, primarily our family services coordinators. So you're not brought into a room full of doctors. We actually do not encourage physicians to speak about organ donation. We, as the New England Organ Bank, are the experts in talking about donation. We do this all the time. I can come and sit with you for 4 hours and talk about your child. I can talk about your life. We can help you with different things. It doesn't have to be about donation. But we're there to support you, support your family, help you, give you the information so that you can make the right decision for your family. So you're not brought into a room because I can imagine that thought is out there by
that thought
many
is with
people.
me, that I would be brought into a boardroom
Right.
with a panel of doctors, and to think about that, you know, not knowing
We were in
what
a
the
waiting
process
room. We
is.
actually had like a private waiting room, family room that we stayed in overnight, and people were coming in and checking on us, but we had full access to my son, and so one of the things that I was worried about was that are they going to stop caring for him
Right.
because I'm considering organ donation?
Right.
And I can tell you, absolutely not. I mean, they were repositioning him. They were checking his vital signs every 15 minutes. I mean, he had amazing care while he was there. And it gave him the best opportunity at life. And it became more and more obvious that life was not an option anymore. So what's the next option that we can do? And that was organ donation.
And I think it's very nice to hear that, knowing that if my husband and I were ever to go in a situation like that, knowing that to have this information, under my belt is nice to know that, you know, we can go forward in life, knowing the information to make the best decision, and in a calm environment, if you will, if you would call that calm. But it would be the most calm it would probably be in making that decision.
It's important that it's the most respectful environment, because you can have, death is going to occur whether we're involved or not, whether the organ bank's involved or not. But there's a difference between death and there's a difference between a good death. So we want to make sure that it's a good death, as good as in a tragic situation as you can make it. So we make sure that it's a private room. We make sure that we're involved in we have a collaborative plan with the hospital so that it's not in the hallway,
Right.
so that it's not in, you don't feel attacked, so that, so that it's the right time,
Right.
because we can assess, okay, this is not the right time to talk to the family. This is the right time to talk to the family because that's what we do.
Right.
So we want to make sure it's not brought up prematurely, and we want to make sure that the family also hasn't said, we are done.
Yeah.
We are just done. And then we're kind of coming in at the 11th hour and saying, but if you wait another however many hours, we could possibly do this. So we try really hard to maintain great relationships with the hospitals to make sure that we can give families the best opportunity and the best hospital experience in a tragic situation as we can.
Yeah.
And they'll figure out which nurse blends best with the patient, which one has the best relationship
Compatibility.
or rapport to be able to begin to open up the topic, to begin talking about some of these difficult things. They, so like I said, the primary care nurse for him was with us the entire time, and it just made sense for her to be able to talk to us about it.
Is there a greater need for children or adult organs, or does it matter? Can an adult receive a child's organ or vice versa?
Well, organs are primarily placed by size. There are more adults waiting for solid organ transplant than children, which is good, I suppose, depending on how you look at it. But an adult can receive a child's organ. Sometimes for a very, very young child, we can recover their kidneys, what's called en bloc, which means together. And both kidneys can be transplanted as one into an adult, and they would function as one kidney. However, we couldn't transplant an infant's heart into an adult or vice versa. So there does have to be a size match. So, and that's how patients are listed. So if I have a very young donor, an adult isn't going to show up on my list because when I request a list, I have the my patient's size and weight listed, and they have to list their patients within a range. So.
And I'm sorry, how long or how old can patients be? Is there a particular age, something that's too young, too old?
To be a donor or a recipient?
To be a donor?
To be a donor, we assess from age newborn to age 85. So you can donate up to age 85, and we have had a lot of successes with that. People think, oh, who would want my organs? I'm 84 years old. Well, I can tell you there are some 84-year-olds out there that are probably healthier than I am. So we will assess those patients because people are getting transplanted.
And what's an organ doctor called?
A physician who recovers. Well, there's a transplant physician who will do the transplant, and then it's a recovery surgeon or a procurement surgeon who will come, and they're from the recovery team who will come to the donor hospital to recover the organs.
Okay, and at the point of recovery, is that when they start testing to see who would be the best match? How long of a process is that?
Well, that's all going on. Once we have discussed donation with the family and either done the disclosure or the consent, depending on the circumstance of the donor and the family situation, we, during that time, are doing tests and during this time period from declaration of death onward, we're doing testing to evaluate the patient and evaluate their potential organs that are available for donation and their medical suitability. So as we're doing that, we're compiling all of that information, and that's when we send that information to the United Network of Sharing, and then we get our lists. And then we don't go to the operating room until we have organs placed. So. Okay.
And if people want more information, where would they go?
They can go to donatelifenewengland.org. The New England Organ Bank has a website, neob.org. We're also on Facebook. And you can find anything on Facebook, I think. And the most important thing, really, a takeaway message is share your life, share your decision, and register to be an organ donor.
Can people register online?
People can register online at donatelifenewengland.org, and they can go on Facebook through our site or through our webpage, and you can register at the DMV also. New Hampshire now has a registry now, which is great, and that really helps a lot because it takes the onus and it takes that one more decision off of your family. And many times I'll go to a family and I'll say, I'm here to help you fulfill your loved one's wish, and they say, oh, we didn't know he was an organ donor. And I'll say, look, he was a registered donor, and I can show them that document, and it actually makes them feel better that they didn't have to make yet
That
one
decision.
more
That
decision,
decision.
Right.
and they can honor their loved one's wish.
Absolutely.
Well, I think being a mom myself, I think it is a gift of life that we would give to another person. But I think parents in general are afraid of having this discussion. And I think it's an honor to sit down with you, Lorene, honestly, to hear your story and to share that with somebody like myself who has never given this a thought, nor have I ever discussed this with my husband at all. So I think, when I go home and after supper time and the kids are all in bed and everything, this would be something to have a discussion some evening with my husband, just to share the information that, what I've learned and discussed with everybody today. And I hope that, other parents out there do understand that this process is in effect, and it does happen every day, like Chris explained. And this is something.
It does help because there are very certain circumstances that someone can become an organ donor. It's not every death, only very specific types of death where you can become an organ donor, and it helps you make some sense out of a completely chaotic situation, and it gives you a sense of pride for yourselves and then for siblings, because I have 2 other children, and it gives them a sense of pride also. So it's not, it's very beneficial across the board.
And I think a lot of people go through life, maybe not so much the younger generation, but more the older generation. They go through life sometimes with tunnel vision, and they only see certain aspects of only what they're going through. And I think that hearing a compelling story, as Denise said earlier, could change somebody's viewpoint and life
Well,
about
I think
this.
you need to look at it on both sides as well, because what type of childhood illnesses need these type of transplants? What if your child was, really ill with what type of illnesses would a transplant help with?
Well, if you had a a congenital heart issue or cerebral palsy, there are many different cystic fibrosis patients that need lung transplants. So I think if you look at it as if my child needed an organ, I would need another family to make this decision.
Right.
And
So why
and
shouldn't
give
you
my
make
child the gift of life. So
Right.
I think you do
If you
need to
look
look
at
at
it-
both sides of it.
I think if you look at it that way, it just makes sense that
And
it's
if you would consider being a recipient.
that you should consider being a donor. And they do a lot of testing to make sure that you're really dead.
And families are encouraged to ask questions. I'm a medical person, so it's not as overwhelming for me. But in that circumstance, of course, it would be very overwhelming. But encouraging families to ask questions, to try not to be bowled over by the medical concerns and questions, to ask the questions and ask the hard questions.
Now, I think some concerns would be, donating organs and tissues that were used in research. Is that something that's typically done, or is that a separate type of sign-up?
We ask for consent for research. Specifically, our medical board at the New England Organ Bank researches each research protocol very in-depth, and they determine if it's an appropriate protocol or not to follow. So we have a couple of the lung preservation machine, the heart preservation machine, but we do ask the family specifically if they're willing to donate for research or not. And they have the option to say yes or no. So it's really, we give them the information.
Can they have the option of saying, I want it to go to a live person before it goes to research?
Yes, we would always, in almost every circumstance, we would recover for the purposes of transplantation versus just the purposes of research. Now, if we knew, for example, that a patient, the donor had lung disease for whatever reason, and we knew couldn't be a lung donor, but if we had a lung research protocol, we would say to the family, we would not be able to recover because of X, Y, and Z circumstances for transplant, but would you be willing to have them recover lungs for research? So the family would know specifically what those organs are being recovered for.
Okay, and I think the other thing that a lot of people, or the misconception, is that the quality of care they receive, if they sign a donor card, am I going to receive less care? Are they still going to try to keep me alive, or if I'm 80,
very common.
are they going to say, "Oh no, you match with this 14-year-old, we're not going to switch your organs"?
No,
No?
absolutely not. The doctors that we had at Boston were just incredible. And my walk away with that was when the doctor told me, did the final declaration of brain death. That was a failure to him. Doctors don't like to fail. Death is a failure to doctors, and they don't want to fail. There's the flip side of the coin for organ donation, but no, they get the same amazing treatment that anybody else would get.
And that's a very, very common misconception that
Yes.
that people have, that if I have it on my license, are they not going to treat me?
But they have to treat you in order to keep you viable, either for life or for organ donation.
To
You
be
can't-
able to donate.
Right, you can't.
Right.
you
To
can't-
maintain the
Right.
option of donation
Yes.
Right.
for the
Those
family.
Organs have
so-
to be in pristine condition. My son couldn't donate his lungs because at the point of impact, there was a lesion on one of his lungs and they couldn't use his lungs. And so it was, it's got to be pristine, so the care has got to be amazing.
So when you sign organ donation, does it automatically default to all organs period?
Yes,
Okay.
when you sign for the registry,
Okay.
you are giving your consent to be an organ and tissue donor.
Okay.
So when you sign that donor card, yes, you are.
Okay.
And why should minorities be particularly concerned about organ donation?
Well, about 35% of people that are waiting for organs are African American due to genetic predispositions of high blood pressure, diabetes, etc. So certainly we try to provide a lot of education, and there's a lot of education out there, but there is a high degree of organ failure just related to those certain genetic predisposition of those diseases.
So does your website have different events that you might be at that people could come to you and talk to you personally and get more information to feel more empowered to make that decision to become a donor?
Yeah, our website, neob.org, actually has some really nice stories about organ and tissue donors. It has frequently asked questions on it. It has, job listing. It has all kinds of information and different events. Our Facebook page, as well as Donate Life New England, also that's on Facebook, and donatelifenewengland.org does have information about different events.
The National Kidney Foundation was a big sponsor for the donor games down there.
Okay.
And we do have many families like Lorene that come out with us and talk. When I teach at different nursing schools, many times I'll have a donor family come with me or a recipient come with me because, as you said, I've done this for 15 years. I'm very passionate about my job. I'm very passionate about organ and tissue donation and saving the lives of recipients and helping donor families. But to have someone like Lorene share her story,
to hear it from you, it's more compelling
amazing.
and
Exactly.
to meet you.
Thank you.
And you have an amazing story.
Yeah, it is an amazing story.
And I think also stories, whether you read it on the internet or the daily newspaper, we have the newspaper delivered to our doorstep every single day. And that's one thing that my husband and I do read. You know, we're more newspaper readers than we are online. And I remember 2 years ago, I read a story in our newspaper about a family who had a bone marrow donation, and that story was compelling. And for some reason or another, I was someone who automatically got on the phone the next day calling the 800 number. And right now I am on the registry for the bone marrow donation. So, you know, hopefully a story like this is compelling to others to make that decision
Well, I know
to go that route.
after the funeral, for a long time afterwards, people would drive by my house and just stop by, say, "Can I ask you a quick question?" "Yeah." "What?" You know, I didn't know what might be about. "Can I have an open casket if I donate my organs?"
Oh,
"You
really?
can." "Okay, thanks." Off we, you know, and there were many, many people in this very small community, and it was a very small community, stopping by, openly talking about it at the general store over coffee, and not so much prying into my personal details, but it opened up conversation in the community.
And they wanted to know more about it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and my son was a Boy Scout, and several years after, another boy from his Boy Scout troop died, and as a result of the death, his parents donated him and actually sent us a personal card and said it was because our story impacted them so greatly that they were able to donate their son's organs in a very difficult, horrific time, but did it with honor and grace
Respect.
because of what we were able to put out there for other people. So.
Okay, so to get on a happier note, before we close, can you tell our viewers what your favorite book of all time is?
Favorite book of all time. The Secret.
The Secret?
Yeah.
What was it about?
The Secret? Self-fulfilling destiny. You get back what you put out there. So as long as I continue to put out positive energy, it will come back.
Well, it certainly looks like you did that with your whole life. What about you? Or you want Melanie to go first?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Well, right now in my life, my husband and I only read children's books, and that's all we have time for at night, between 6 and 8 o'clock at night. So digging back into my past, I think after college, one book that I really enjoyed reading was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I think people in general should become genuinely interested in others and listen to their stories, such as this.
Well, I'm a little bit less heavy than these two are, so
Okay.
I'm going to go with the Diana Gabaldon Outlander series.
Oh, what was that about?
Yeah.
It's about a woman who goes to a foreign country and then ends up going back in time, and she actually ends up living and marrying and having a whole life in another time, and then eventually comes back. And it's a wonderful it's a wonderful series. I live a lot of heavy with my job, so I like the lighter when when I'm
good.
off.
I
So
agree. I agree. Yeah.
Absolutely.
but it's a great series.
Oh, that sounds great. So you might be at the Fairy Tale Festival this summer to give people more
Yes.
information, and they should think about it as a celebration of life. Don't you agree?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. Until next time, keep asking questions. Consider becoming an organ donor. You never know, the possibilities are endless.